In another tone-deaf interview, Keir Starmer has once again shown his disdain for the working classes of Great Britain. He's once again doubled down on the ignorance surrounding the reasons behind the unrest here in this country. He has continued to criticise and speak out about the so-called far-right riots that we saw in the wake of the killings in Southport. Disregarding the fact that this was not a direct response to the murders, however, the murders acted as somewhat of a catalyst for underlying bubbling tensions amongst the vast majority of Brits who really need to see some sort of agenda with regards to the control of mass immigration, both legal and illegal, into the UK. He once again used the actions of a few thugs, a few idiots, a handful of people who partook in criminal activities, including assault and arson, to completely disregard the tens or hundreds of thousands of people who attended said protests and their genuine underlying concerns about the destruction of British culture and the increase in crime we see as a result of unchecked and unvetted immigration into the UK. The Daily Mail writes, Keir Starmer blasted racist rioters who took to the streets after the Southport child murders today and warned they would not dictate government policy. He does continue to loop back to the Southport murders and how he believes that in the same way the murder of George Floyd was attributed to all of the BLM action we saw post that the riots we saw and the protests we saw across the country in the wake of the Southport murders can be directly attributed to the murders themselves. Of course, people were angry at the murder of 3 innocent children and the injuring of many, many more. However, it's fairly safe to say that the vast majority of people who turned out to these protests, and the vast majority, dare I say, were completely peaceful, were doing so because of greater underlying issues which have gone unaddressed by successive governments. The Prime Minister said there is racism there, as he was asked about the motives of those who took to the streets after 3 young girls were killed on July 29th. In a BBC interview, the ever impartial BBC, who I made a video about recently, the PM acknowledged that people have strong views on immigration, but he was not prepared to tolerate that sort of disorder. Sorry to interrupt the video, just wanted to say a quick thank you to everyone who supports the channel. If you haven't done so already, then I do ask that you kindly click the subscribe button down below. 97% of people who watch these videos aren't currently subscribed, which is crazy, right? It's totally free, you can change your mind, and there won't be any hard feelings if you choose to unsubscribe at a later date. If you do find these videos useful and you want to help me out, you can buy me a beer by clicking the link in the description below, and that also would be very much appreciated, particularly in this hot weather. Anyway, back to the video. Now, what we see time and time again here from Keir Starmer is his desire to use the criminal and violent actions of a small handful of people to completely dismiss the genuine concerns of tens, hundreds of thousands, or maybe even millions of people here in the UK. And I totally agree that we should not let the actions of a few violent thugs, of a few people who cause criminal damage, of a few people who assault the public or police officers, we should not let criminals dictate the law in this country. We should not let criminals dictate government policy. So he's focused on the criminality of a few so he can casually dismiss the genuine concerns of a significant proportion of the people that he is elected to represent. On Friday, a far-right thug who helped set fire to a hotel filled with asylum seekers in a copycat riot in Rotherham was jailed for 9 years, the longest prison sentence handed out yet. Yes, even more severe than the ones handed out to people who posted hurty words on Facebook. Thomas Burley, 27, pleaded guilty to arson with the intent to endanger life after he stoked a fire in a bin by an entranceway to Holiday Express on August the 4th. Now, I'm not going to go into the ins and outs of this. I haven't seen any videos or photos of the incident. I'm not sure that stoking a fire in a bin near an entranceway to a hotel is a deliberate attempt to endanger life, but I can't condone, or nor should anyone condone, anyone who goes out and commits arson and acts in a criminal way, even if it is in response to genuine concerns. These people should be punished. However, Keir is highlighting a single case here of someone who has acted in a criminal way as a way to brush under the carpet the genuine and very real concerns of the British public who feel they are being consistently ignored, undermined, belittled, and in many cases criticised by the person that is elected to represent them. So Keir also said he was concerned by the resurgence of the far right in Germany and France, saying they offered the snake oil of the right answer. Now, there has been an upsurge in right-wing parties. I'm not going to say that they are far-right, but they are certainly right of centre parties in a lot of mainland Europe. And in the vast majority of cases, this is a response to, again, immigration policies of those countries, and people being fed up of seeing their culture eroded and crime becoming almost out of control in certain parts of those countries. Keir refers to these so-called far-right parties offering the snake oil of an easy answer, basically dismissing these parties as populist, dismissing these parties as winning votes on the back of promises that the public want to hear. Now, it might well be that these parties don't have the experience, they don't have the people to run the country as a whole, and indeed people are voting for them in effect as a one-party vote. However, it does the mainstream parties absolutely no good whatsoever to completely disregard the reason that these somewhat more extreme, shall we say, parties are getting so much support from the public. We saw it here in the UK when it came to Brexit. The expectation amongst the elites and the ruling classes was that everyone would vote to stay in the EU. They were shocked to find out, however, that the silent majority had a voice, and when given that voice, they voted for what they genuinely believed was best for the country. We saw this with the massive increase in the people voting for UKIP in the run-up to said referendums. And we're seeing it again now with a massive surge in support for Reform UK. Unlike UKIP, however, Reform UK do seem to be a more complete party. Whilst certainly the majority of people who voted for them, I believe, have put immigration at the forefront of their voting strategy, it is fairly safe to say that Reform UK aren't necessarily just a one-policy party. They do have the experience, dare I say, to run the country as a whole. And Keir Starmer continues to casually ignore this upsurge in votes for parties like Reform, instead casually dismissing widespread concerns about immigration, both legal and illegal, and putting it down to racism, which in the vast majority of cases it is not. In a wide-ranging interview, he also defended cuts to the winter fuel allowance for pensioners, saying he was willing to make unpopular decisions, and accused the last Tory government of leaving the NHS broken. I said previously that he has gone out of his way to say that he will not bow to what appears to be popular opinion, but instead he's going to reinforce something which is already deemed to be incredibly unpopular. And considering this is coming off the back of people's discontent at the amount of money we are spending as a country that is in significant debt, on supporting illegal and legal migrants, paying for their accommodation, paying for their food, and prioritising them in many aspects of healthcare, he continues to say he is willing to make unpopular decisions, including taking away support for people who have lived in this country their entire lives and paid into the system. It's already being suggested that these cuts to winter fuel allowances could potentially lead to thousands of deaths when it comes to the winter months, when, as we've heard in a slightly cliched way, older people ultimately have to make the decision between heating and eating. Yet he continues to support policies which allow people to come into this country and receive support at the hands of the taxpayer. Keir Starmer is showing massive disdain for the British public, avoiding the conversation on immigration by saying that it's a populist opinion, and because the protests and riots contained a very small faction of people who maybe were far right, and not just concerned citizens of Britain, he has used the criminality and the assaults and the arson committed by this very small group of people as a means to dismiss the concerns and the genuine feelings of the British public as a whole, who have felt ignored for far too long. Stay safe and stay sane, everybody.